Today you see a top and a dress, woven fabric made from the same pattern, an amazing V neckline, fabulous print, and a knitted solid. Really comfy, some gathered tees are involved. Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and what we'll see today is some woven sewing. I really like the pattern I'm going to share with you today, and it's brand new from Sinclair patterns. It's just that they've been creating some woven styles that I really like. You might sort of get the gist that I favor woven over knit. I like both, but I just really love sewing the woven fabrics. I think I always find the best ones, and I'm really itching to sew them up. And it's mainly what composes my fabric collection. So the Ipanema top and dress, for me the most striking part that you see first is that V neckline, and it's not a normal V neckline. It's sort of rounded up to here, and then it goes into a V that's finished with two plackets that overlap over here. So I think that neckline looks great on everyone. The bodice is relaxed, it hits the waist, and there are bust cup size options here, and a gorgeous little dart right there, which is always very appreciated for myself. 10 out of 10. Below the bodice you can make either a top and use one tier, you can make a dress and use two tiers. Those are gathered onto each other. For the length of the dress, if you want to sew that option, there's two tiers there. On the second tier you have a different cut line for it to finish above the knee or below the knee. So if you prefer below the knee, just leave it full length or chop it up a little more. I think length is something you can always play with. My top is actually quite shorter than that first tier just because I wanted a shorter top. So it's always things that you can change. As an option, if you want to bring the waist in, you can sew in some ties at the side seam. Love that. I'm always going to take that option. For the finish of the sleeves, you can either do it sleeveless, where on the pattern piece you'll find the cut line slightly narrower here, but that ends up at the same height here, which is what I love because I don't like those sleeveless armholes that go deeper down. I don't want to show this area, so it's perfect. And then you can either do a really dramatic sleeve that's short sleeves or 3/4. This sleeve is quite big. The pattern piece can take a bit of fabric. You have gathers on the sleeve cap and gathers into a little cuff right there. And of course I always forget that there are inseam pockets. If you want pockets there, go ahead, do those if you like them. You know I'm not a fan of pockets. Yeah, I just don't do pockets, but you have inseam pockets there if you enjoy that in your garment. Because the Ipanema top is brand new at Sinclair patterns, it'll be with a discount, really good one, around 26% off for a good 2 weeks. That is a nice long time. So it's going to be on sale until the 5th of May. I'll leave all that information in the description box and in the pinned comment so it's easy for you to find. Also my affiliate link to the pattern, if you click on it, it takes you right there. You don't pay any extra, but I do get a commission back from that sale. It is one of the ways I try to make an income by making all these videos that you can watch for free over here. And I really put in a lot of effort to make something that you're gonna really enjoy and where you're gonna really see the sewing up close. So if you do use my affiliate link, I am super grateful. This is designed for woven fabrics. I wouldn't bother making this in a knit fabric. Look, it would be harder to deal with the binding and the plackets with a knit fabric. These are techniques that are more focused for woven fabric. You'd have a better experience sewing these in a woven fabric, so I wouldn't even go with a knit fabric for this design. Just stick with the wovens. Light materials are gonna work best because there's quite a few gathers in the design. You can either choose lightweight structured wovens or lightweight flowy wovens. You know that my personal preference is always going to go to the flowy 100%, so I would always want to do something with rayon or a rayon linen blend, maybe a crepe. If you want it to be fancy, even a silk. But you know, if you're more of a cotton type person, you can use a cotton lawn, a cotton gauze, really light chambray, a light shirting. I personally would not use linen for this one. That's just my personal preference. I just think it's way too structured for the gathers. You like that dramatic gather over here and the garment sticking out away from your body, then go ahead and use a structured fabric. You know, it's always personal preference in the end. I'm really fixed on what I like, so my fabric choice is actually the same for the print and the solid. It's a type of fabric I find a lot here, and it's 87% rayon, 13% linen. Light to medium weight. It's heavier than the typical plain weave of 100% rayon, so it's a little heftier. It has a beautiful drape, flowy, and this type of fabric deals with gathers beautifully. You can still see them and enjoy them, but they stay close to the body. That's what I like. You need a little bit of interfacing because we're going to be interfacing the plackets. We're going to make our own binding to finish this rest of the neckline. And that's it. Really, you don't need any more notions than that. For the sizing, from 0 to 30 US, goes up to a 63-inch hip. Sinclair patterns, as you know, has height files first, petite, regular, and tall. This is helpful. This is just golden for me because the toe file fits me perfectly. I don't need to adjust lengths of sleeves, lengths of bodices. It's just so good. So I think this really helps you with the feet in the vertical sense first. Look at that first and then choose and look at the size chart and see where your circumferences fit into. There are bust cup size options here, A, B, C, D, EF. So 3 options. It'll be a different location and width of the dart intake there for each bust cup size, which I think is great. And this is a loose design. You know, you're going to be able to pull it on over your head without struggling at all. You're going to have about 3 to 5 inches of positive ease at the bust and the waist, much more at hips because of the design and all those tees going on there. And I say 3 to 5 because it's directly proportional to the size that you're sewing. So a size 30 is going to have a bit more ease than a size 0, for example, but all proportionate. I use the CD cup size and everything's perfect. Even the location of the dart was perfect, spot on. I didn't have to lower it or raise it. I sewed a straight size 16 with the toe file, no fitting adjustments, like 0 fitting adjustments. And I got a perfect fit. According to me, it feels great on the waist. Bodice seam is exactly where my waist is, so I'm very satisfied. I have filmed some sewing for you. I have focused on the neckline, the placket, and the binding. I think that's what takes the longest, and I would say it's like an intermediate technique. Not because it's super hard, just because there are a few more steps and you need a little bit of precision. It's not a type of neckline you're gonna rush through and finish in a few minutes. I certainly take my time and I'm going to be showing you that in detail. I have filmed the gathering and the sleeves and more sewing that is on my Patreon page. It's exclusive content for those that join me there and want extra from me. So the video on Patreon for this one is longer. It's got more sewing in there. So let's get on to sewing this gorgeous neckline. I love it so much. This is the front pattern piece for the Ipanema dress, and you can see that from this point on it's on the fold, but then we have a little cutout there and then it goes off into this V neckline. There's going to be a placket here and this area is going to be finished with binding. So I could have stay stitched, and I did do that actually with the dress version I made, but for this one I do want to stabilize this a little bit better because there is a slanted edge here that could potentially stretch out. So I've cut very carefully and I've got my pattern piece right here. I've just flipped it, and over here on this side I'm going to fuse a little bit of interfacing. I've cut them 5/8 of an inch wide, so this is not going to be seen once everything is sewn. The seam allowance we're going to use is 3/8. So by this being 5/8, it's going to be caught in the seam allowance. Now I'm going to do the other side, making sure they both stay the same, in the same place and shape. The bottom layer is my reference. I'm making sure I have the glue side down. It's hard to see with this type of interfacing. Now I've opened it up and you can see that little horizontal snip right there. I want to use another piece of interfacing and stabilize this area here. I'm going to cut it a little shorter over here. Just so all this section is going to be really well reinforced. This section is part of the pattern. You're supposed to do that. It's in the instructions. This part I'm doing as something extra that I like to do. So I'm really confident now that this is going to stay in the same length, and when I go and sew the placket on, I'm not going to have issues. The first thing I'm going to do once I get sewing though is stay stitch this, because this is going to be bound later. I really don't want this stretching out and deforming. What I've got here are the plackets. There's 2 of them and both of the layers have to be interfaced. My fabric's a little larger than what I need, and both of these layers are already interfaced. You can see them right there. I'm going to be super careful to cut this out very accurately. I'm going to do this with a scissors. I get a better result than doing it with a rotary cutter, but the rest, the straight lines, I can do with a rotary cutter. You can see more about block fusing in this video here where it's more detailed. Here are my pattern pieces for my Ipanema top. The only difference between the top and the dress is how many tiers you have. At the bottom, I just have 1 short tier for this top. It's actually quite shorter than the original first tier because I don't want my top to be that long. There's just 2 rectangles here on the fold. This is the front bodice that you saw me stabilizing that center area to receive that little placket over there. Both of those are interfaced. Back bodice is on the folds, quite simple. Now you're going to have bust darts. Depending on the cup size option you have, how big these bust darts are. I'm sewing the CD cup size option, so I've got a really nice dart there. And that little bit there is binding that's going to finish this top part of the neckline there and the back neckline over there, because this center area will have that placket. If you're doing a dress, then you're going to have a second T, which is just another rectangle that's much wider, so that this gathers onto there and then the other T gathers onto here. This is a 3/4 length sleeve that is quite dramatic. It's wider on the sleeve cap and at the bottom of the hem. It has this shape at the bottom. The longer curved area here is going to be towards the back, the shorter towards the front. That's just a little rectangle cuff that is shorter than this, because this is all going to be gathered into there. That is going to be gathered into the armhole, so it's quite a dramatic sleeve, and that's why I've chosen a really drapey fabric. You can also do a short sleeve version that has another cut line there. Then you have a separate cuff to fit a short sleeve. First things first, I'm stay stitching the neckline. This is the front neckline. It's quite small. I'm going from the shoulder down towards the center, both sides, keeping the same direction as I stay stitch. The seam allowance when we sew the binding in later is going to be 3/8, so I'm doing it smaller than that right here. And on the back, I'm also going from the shoulder into the center and then flipping the fabric, going from the shoulder into the center again. Here I have the 2 placket pieces. I've just folded them right sides together right there. Remember, we have that little shape like that, so that's how it looks. One thing that's going to help me when I sew this is I've drawn the seam allowance, which is 3/8 here. I've also hand basted that in place so it doesn't move around anywhere. It's a curved area, I want to be careful. So I'm just going to go slowly following the mark of my friction pen right there and sew these together. The seam allowance we use here is 3/8. All the seam allowance for the neckline on this top is 3/8, but then the rest, side seams, shoulder seams, the T's of the skirts and all that, all the rest is 5/8 of an inch. On this folded section, I put the needle right on the edge by hand. The first couple of stitches I hand cranked, then I started sewing normal. So on this little curve, I didn't back stitch, I just left the thread so I can knot them by hand. Now I'm going to trim away here just to cut away a bit of the bulk. And the other thing I'm going to do is take little triangle notches right here. It is a curved area, so this reduces the bulk inside when we flip it. Little extra tiny step. So when we flip it like this, we're going to get a super smooth edge right there with no dimpling and pockets, because I didn't back stitch and we don't have that back and forth, and it looks really smooth. That's what I wanted. I'm going to press it. I'm also going to hand baste around it so it can act as one piece and the layers don't move around everywhere. For this pattern, we do this part of the neckline first before sewing the shoulder seams. It's just easier to have access. Now it's really important to mark this that we have there. It's on the pattern. Right from the center, it's diagonal down to one side and then to the other. And that's so we can align the bottom of these plackets. I have the same angle. That's important that you mark and do it with something that's going to come out, because this is the right side of the fabric. Just a friction pen, so that's gonna work. On the top we have this edge that's curved, that's finished, and then we have this raw edge. This of course is the one that's going to align with this raw edge. We need to leave 3/8 free here because that's going to be finished with binding later. So this top edge that's finished should align right here on that dot of 3/8. I've just drawn that right there so I can see it. So that's going to go there, and the same on this side. You should have a bit of this left over on the top. And then at the bottom, this is going to align with that mark we have right here. Okay, everything lines up. At the bottom, when we sew, we want to go further 3/8 from this horizontal edge. So I've also drawn a dot here and a dot there. So I'm going to sew from the top, from the edge here, down, stop at that dot and reinforce, and then do the same on both sides. Okay, both sides of the plackets are sewn right up to the dots here, and leaving a little bit raw there to finish sewing the binding on later. This is my amazing white interfacing that we're not going to see, I promise, but it really served a purpose because everything matches up super nicely here. So what we want to do now is from this little corner, snip into there on both sides. And we're just doing it on this layer, so we're not cutting through the placket pieces. It's just the layer of the front piece. Now that that snip is done, we can bring this, tuck it under there, seam allowance is tucked in there, and then this can come and overlap like that. So that seam allowance that we just cut is going to be folded to the inside, and I'm just going to hold it all together right here. Everything's good, and then we flip this up, and now we need to grab all of this together and sew along there. So I'm just going to tidy this up, and then we'll stitch that little seam, and that finishes this section. Quite a few layers to go through here. You can start further from the edge. There's that little seam sewn, and now let's flip this like that, and that finishes the bottom of this neckline. It's so neat. Okay, everything's been pressed nicely. The shoulder seams have been sewn, serged. Now the seam allowance up here is 5/8, but when I was serging I trimmed it down to 3/8 because I don't want all that bulk there. Now that everything's pressed, we can serge these edges here and here and there. So I'm going to just get that done, and then we can start binding the whole rest of the neckline. I always prioritize finishing the neckline before doing other things like bust studs over here. These can come later. I made my bias tape using this bias tape maker. It's got an 18 on the back. I cut the long strip that I needed for this neckline, and it was 3.5 centimeters, 1 3/8. And I did make it, but then after getting both of the folds, I unfolded one of them so that it's flat, but I kept the other side folded. Remember, we had a little bit of leftover fabric on the top. It's folded in because we've already finished the placket. In order to see what I'm doing, I want to sew this first section from this side so that I can sew flush against there, right there, 3/8 this way. If I do it all from this side, I can't really see what I'm doing. I'm going to sew these sections first from this side so I can see just a little bit, like an inch or so here. This is my guide at the bottom for 3/8, and that's exactly where the edge of the fabric is. So I'm going to put my needle down there by hand. That's enough here on this side. So that's how that looks. It's right flush against there, and you need to leave a little bit left over so that we can fold it in at the end. And I'm going to do the same on this side, only with this side I'm going to end up over here. You can see it's sewn right against that edge of the placket there. Now I'm going to turn this around and finish sewing the rest of the binding with the binding on top. So I'm going to trim this a little bit smaller. I'm going to trim down to about 1/4 inch here. I don't want to leave 3/8 in here. And then after trimming, I'm going to snip because everything's really curved. The next step is going to be to understitch. So extending this seam allowance underneath the binding, we're going to sew right there on the edge. This has an L on it. It's also a type of blind hem pressible, but different. When you move this, it moves this edge in or out, so you can actually get whatever seam allowance you want, and it's really helpful. I've set it here to about 1/8 inch. This binding that's extended is going to come to the inside of the garment. You can see the seams there. And now I left this a little longer, about 3/8 longer, as you can see there. All we need to do here is fold this like this, and then just fold this in. And that's how it's going to be finished on this end. What I do here is with my seam ripper, I tuck in this little seam allowance that wants to poke out right here so that it's all tucked and neat under there. This section here is something I'm going to finish off by hand right there. I'm going to sew it into that seam. It'll be invisible from the inside. So from the right side of the garment, you can see the neckline is super smooth. This curve continues straight into that bound area there. There's no jagged edge, nothing strange there. And the top stitching is going to start right here, that way, when we sew it. But I am going to do this little bit there by hand. And it'll be the same on both sides. This is my dress. I think this print is super amazing. I have sewn a garment with it before. I still have plenty left because when I like something, I'll buy a lot of yardage, and I don't mind having several garments in the same fabric because tell me this print is not super amazing. It's got a bit of animal print in there. It's got different colors. It's a white background. There's quite a lot of black. I made sure to cut the plackets in a different type of print where I had those vertical features so that you could see the placket there. That was something I actually thought about before cutting it out, and everything turned out really well. I did the top stitching around the edges with white right here. This little edge there is finished by hand. No drama doing that. All the rest is sewn with a machine. You can see the under stitching and then the top stitching. That's why you see 2 rows from the inside, but on the outside you just have 1 row. Very nice. I did the binding of the armhole in the exact same way. Here is a little waist tie. I made it quite shorter than the pattern piece just because when I tied at the back I don't want a lot of it dangling down my skirt, so I shortened mine quite a bit. Mine are 55 centimeters, which is 22 inches. For reference, if you like yours shorter, this works enough to tie it around and do a little bow. I have a bust dart there that hides into the print, so it's very subtle. You don't even know it's there. It does accomplish its task, which is give you that amazing shaping on the side. And then comes the 2 tiers, 1 tier and the 2nd tier. I didn't make any changes to the length of these tiers. I wanted the dress above the knee. Using the toe file, it gave me exactly the length I needed, so no changes. And let me show you on the inside. I did bring it in at the waist after trying it on for the first time, so the seam allowance on the sides is a little bit bigger on the side seam. I took it in by 3/8. It's hard, this is hard to see, but there's more seam allowance here on the side seam. By the time you get to the dart, it tapers back to the regular seam allowance and then back to the skirt. So just something I did at the end. It's still nice and loose. It just would have been a little looser if I hadn't have taken it in. So let's say in reality I did a size 16, 14 waist and back to 16 at the skirt pieces, and I think that's what gave me a fit that I'm happy with. Although it's still wide, I still pull it in with the ties. I'm much happier like this. I have styled this by itself and then with 2 layering pieces on top, different colors. I'm upset I don't have anything with white because I would have loved to pair this under something white, but I just don't have that, so I have to make it. So let's see. This is my Ipanema from Sinclair patterns in a rayon linen blend, styled super simple, just with heels and a bag. Super striking print. This is a size 16 with a toe file, no changes made to the pattern at all, and this is a sleeveless version. The skirt has 2 tiers, 2 gathered sections there, and it ends up right above my knee where I like it. The bodice hits exactly at the height of my waist, as you can see there. And there's a little tie at the back that's optional. I always like ties when designs are a little bit looser. Like you see, if I'd left the ties, I would have much more ease at the waist, which a lot of people like, but I prefer to bring it in a little bit more closer to the body. And I love that fit. I love how comfortable it is. I can still pull it over my head without needing zippers like that, so it's comfortable. And the little tie is not too evident right there. The neckline is gorgeous. It's rounded and then it ends up in a V with plackets that are overlapped. Nice cover on the armholes, finished with binding inside. It's super lovely, and I really enjoyed sewing that placket. There's a bust dart there with my option for the CD cup size. There are other cup size options, and there is a closer look at the placket for the V neckline and the armhole. Lovely, super pretty. I think it's just such a floaty dress, such a light fabric, drapey, which is always my choice when there's gathers involved in a design. Of course, you can use more structured fabrics, but I always go for the floaty ones because that's how I feel best. Love this dress, it's so amazing. Here I've got different shoes that match the little crop shirt I'm wearing. The color of the crop shirt is in the print, so it's lovely. I really like how it brings out the dark red color in the print. It's mainly white, so this is another option when I need a light layer on top. And because this is a cropped shirt, it's just a bit under my natural waist. I feel I can wear a skirt that's more voluminous on the bottom without it poking out. So little crop jackets come in handy for styles like this. I always want to explore options for toppers because there are days where you do want to layer on top, and not every style of top is going to match every style of dress. So the crop little shirt is amazing here, and the neckline of the dress is simple enough that it doesn't clash with the collar of the shirt. Here is another option for layering, this time with black because there is black in the print. This is my Metra blazer from Love Notions, and it tends to go with any style of dress, whether it's fitted or more voluminous like this one. And it's because it's not too long and it does sort of nip in at the waist, which I love. So this is another option. This vest is my most worn garment, I have to admit. I put it over everything, and another way I can use it over this dress, it fits right in and I feel like it's not out of place. What I look for also with vests are that the type of neckline doesn't clash with the neckline of the dress. So if the dress had a really elaborate type of neckline with a collar and things, I probably wouldn't layer something like this on top, but I feel the V neckline there is simple and striking enough to not clash with this lapel of the vest. Now this is not the most amazing, exciting color you've ever seen. Oh my gosh, it's like the most boring color you've ever seen. Even in my eyes, I see it and it's like, oh, it's brown. But it does have a place and a time, and there is a day where I'm gonna have to wear brown because I feel like it. And it's really hard for me to pick up solids, but I thought this was a good fabric to film all the necklines so you would see it properly. So it's all the same, it's all the same size, it's the same neckline, the same placket over here. Over here it's easier to see, of course. There is a little bit that was sewn by hand invisibly, and then the rest is sewn by machine of the binding. This one has a beautiful sleeve here with the gathers on this section, and then at the bottom it's really wide, gathered into this cuff over here. This content is on my Patreon page. If I'd made the top as per the pattern using that first tee, this would have ended up more like a tunic, so I shortened it by quite a bit. I wanted this at my mid hip. So the finished length of this tee for me is 20 centimeters or 8 inches. If you'd like a shorter top, I think that works. It's just cutting that rectangle shorter, easy peasy. I don't consider it a hack, it's just personal preference. And here I have the ties, the bust up. Probably you can see it better right there. It comes from lower and angles up. That's the way it's been made in the pattern. It's easier for you to see it with this one. I have the brown serger thread, which is really important for me to have everything match. Here's a sleeve cap, very easy to sew because it's gathered, and then the gathers go over here. Very lovely. On the sides I press my seams open and serge everything separately. That is my preference. The seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, so I usually trim that smaller when I serge. It is mentioned in the pattern that you could do French seams if you'd like, and 5/8 of an inch is conducive to that. You sew your first seam at 3/8, and then then trim, and then you sew your second seam at 1/4 of an inch. I don't like French seams if there's going to be a join of seam allowances like this, like from the tees. I think that is super bulky. And also if there's a bust start, having a French seam in there, it's just a lot of layers. Extremely picky if I'm going to do French seams. And it has to be a garment that's super simple, where it's just seams and not many other seams going on in there for me to actually do French seams. And also my fabric has to be extremely lightweight. So when you see it mentioned, just know that it's an option, but it's up to you to choose how to finish your seams. And I love my serger for light to medium weight fabrics. It still gives you a nice finish, and I thought I'd mention that. I've styled it 4 ways for you. At I think the first 2 looks, I've tied it up without looking in the mirror or anything, and the ties are up higher. It's a hot mess. But on the third outfit, you're gonna see the ties tied properly at the back. So yeah, that's the way it should be. Let's see it on. This is my second Ipanema. This time I made it as a top. The only difference here is that I have 1 tee sewn onto the bodice. It's actually quite a few inches shorter than the first tee because I wanted my top to be a little shorter and just end up at my mid hip. And this is a sort of monochromatic look, not exactly the same tone, but around the same earthy terracotta tones, so I really love how this looks together. It's the same type of fabric, only it's a solid. I also have the waist ties there. You can see it would look a little bit different without the ties. I'm really glad the ties are there, and if it wasn't on the pattern, I would have actually hacked them to be there. And I love it. The bodice, you can see the seam of the bodice with this one easier, and that it really does hit the height of my waist perfectly. The neckline I think is easier to see over here with the placket. You can see that this one has a 3/4 length option that has gathers there on the top and also at the bottom with a little cuff that you'll see in a sec. There you can see the buster, it fits perfectly. It's a really dramatic sleeve, and because there's so much gathers involved, I also chose a flowy drapey fabric for it. It's always going to be my option for gathers. The next look might be a little bit out there. These are tropical poppy pants, also from Sinclair Patterns, and there's actually the same tone of brown in the pants. It's not too apparent, so when this happens, I try to expand on the brown by using the same color shoes, the same color bag, so you can really know that there is brown in these pants because there are other colors in there. I think this is a little bit out there, a little bit more brave on my part, but I've developed my sense of fashion so well that I'm not embarrassed to walk out the door in something like this. I feel great. Here's a more traditional look with a denim look cotton jersey. This is a sky skirt from Sinclair Patterns. It's a knit, it's a pull-up skirt, super comfortable, and it's fitted at the hips, which is great for a top like this that's more voluminous on the top, but then you have a type of flounce at the bottom. So you get some volume at the hem, but not where it matters. You don't want the volume at the hips. So I think the top goes beautifully over here. This time I've tied the back perfectly. The other times it was sort of lopsided. So just be careful how you tie it at the back, that it doesn't shift to other places. I love this. I've paired it with gold leather accessories on my feet and with the handbag. And this is a really nice, fun look. I know brown isn't the most amazing color you've ever seen, but I've always liked pairing it with red just to liven it up. Also, this brown isn't too dark, it's sort of more terracotta, and I think it goes really well with white jeans. These are ready to wear white jeans. The only reason I haven't made jeans like that is because I can't find the right denim. I think this is great, and the red goes right in here with my style, my personality, and my favorite color, of course, always with the red lipstick as well to go with it, because that's my signature color. So this is great. I love how this looks, and I really wanted my top a little shorter, and I'm glad I made that decision. Lovely sleeves, really fun sew. Let me tell you how much I enjoyed sewing these. I did take my time. These are not garments you're going to sew in 2 hours. At least it takes me a while because I hand based and I take my time, stabilize the necklines, do the binding, you know. I really do take that hand crafting time seriously to get the best result that I can. And this was just so fun. You know, woven garments, necklines like this are just the best. And I think it's real worth to try something like this if you haven't tried it before. You're gonna get a really pretty neckline, really comfy dress, floaty, and you can choose what you want. Put sleeves or not, there's quite a lot of options. So recommend, as always, Sinclair Patterns are really good quality. That's why I'm an affiliate, because I really like the product. Don't forget to check out the Ipanema top. That's 26% off through the 5th of May. All the information is always down below. That's all from me. I hope you enjoyed this one. If you've never tried this neckline, don't be scared, just take it step by step, and even practice on scraps first if you want to, just so that you're really sure when you go to the real thing. I really enjoyed it, and I'll leave you for now. Have an amazing rest of your day. Bye.